Sukarno was born in 1901 in Java, the dominant Indonesian island. He grew up under the demeaning rule of Dutch colonialism. Sukarno was an ardent nationalist who led Indonesia's independence movement. He became president of the new Republic of Indonesia in 1949.
Belum ada yang menandingi Soekarno sampai sekarang. Dialah yang mengerti nasion Indonesia itu. Karena itu juga Soekarno lah yang tidak jemu-jemunya menganjurkan tentang nation and character building.
President Sukarno's ambition was to unite a new nation from a clash of cultures, languages, and the world's main religions. Indonesia is the fourth most populous nation on earth and the world's largest Muslim community.
Kepribadian banteng. Maka karena itu, ayo maju terus, jebol terus, tanam terus.
Sukarno thought he could preserve his own one-man rule by balancing the competing ideologies inside his country.
I tolerate all ideologies. The nationalist ideologies, the religious ideologies, the communist ideologies. So far, they are not making trouble or damage to the Indonesian state.
Sukarno's balancing act might have succeeded indefinitely if the Cold War hadn't been raging outside Indonesia, where the domino theory held sway.
Here's Indochina. If Indochina falls, Thailand is put in almost impossible position. The same is true of Malaya with its rubber and tin. The same is true of Indonesia. If this whole part of Southeast Asia goes under communist domination or communist influence, Japan must inevitably be oriented toward the communist regime.
America says welcome in a big way to President Sukarno. Vice President Nixon and State Secretary Dulles are on hand at Washington's National Airport.
As leader of the highly strategic Indonesian domino, Sukarno was courted by leaders on both sides of the Cold War. He attempted a policy of neutrality, believing this was the best way for his young nation to gain assistance from East and West.
May God give us, America and Indonesia, the best friendship which has ever existed between two nations.
Only 3 months after his address to Congress, he visits China and the Soviet Union. This was interpreted by Washington as going over to the communist enemy. The United States becomes even more alarmed by the success of the Indonesian Communist Party in 1957 elections. Indonesia is now seen as a questionable ally. In the largest covert operation since World War II, President Eisenhower backs rebellions against Javanese rule in the outer islands.
Let's face it, the United States made a horrible blunder in 1957-58 in supporting an independence movement within Indonesia. It was a disaster. We should never have been in it in the first place, and if we were, we shouldn't have been in it the way we were.
American involvement was revealed when a U.S. pilot was shot down. The U.S. quickly withdrew support, and the rebellions collapsed. Western intervention had backfired. Having stood up to a superpower, President Sukarno's grip on his country tightens, and he becomes emboldened on the international stage. Sukarno uses the United Nations to protest about Western intervention in his region.
I hate imperialism. I detest colonialism, and I fear the consequences of their last bitter struggle for life. We are determined that our nations and the world as a whole shall not be the plaything of one small corner of the world.
Shortly afterwards, Britain moves to form the new state of Malaysia on Indonesia's border. Sukarno is not consulted. Incensed, he launches a military campaign against British forces to crush Malaysia. Britain's top propaganda specialist, Norman Redaway, is sent to Singapore to take charge of Britain's propaganda war.
What I remember Norman telling me, his mission was very simple. Do anything you can, he was told, to get rid of Sukarno. And he was given a budget. It was a matter of hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Sukarno had a well-deserved reputation as a womanizer. The CIA had tried to undermine him in the eyes of his people by producing a pornographic film with a body double wearing a Sukarno mask. At least 6 assassination attempts were made on his life. Sukarno blamed the CIA for most of these.
National Congress of the Indonesian Communist Party open.
By the 1960s, under the leadership of Chairman Aidit, the PKI had become the largest communist party outside China and the Soviet Union, with over 3 million members.
Personal appearance of President Sukarno increases the atmosphere of unity of this gathering.
Sukarno himself is a nationalist, not a communist, but he depends on the Communist Party because it can mobilize mass support for his political objectives. In return, Sukarno protected the PKI by banning anti-communist press and by restraining the army, also a potent political force in Indonesia.
The chairman of the Communist Party had outlined a new approach of a kind of parliamentary road to power. At the same time, the Indonesian army was fairly unique because it operated also like a political party. And in that sense, the Communist Party and the army were in competition with each other, all from the village level up to the capital city.
The West, as well as many Indonesians, fear the country is in danger of falling into communist hands. Supporting the army is seen as the best hope for the anti-communist cause. With the PKI growing rapidly under Sukarno's protection, the lines are drawn for an inevitable showdown. To the north, by 1965, the United States is escalating the war in Vietnam. In protest, U.S. buildings in Indonesia become a target.
There were mass demonstrations, thousands of screaming demonstrators that would throw rocks at our embassy. Several with flaming rags around them. So we were, in effect, public enemy number 1 at that point. We had replaced the British.
Anti-Vietnam War protests are also the order of the day at the University of Wisconsin, where Ibnu Santoro has been studying economics for the past 5 years.